Hi, I'm Annie Botticelli, and I am going to talk about Saturn return. Saturn return is a transit that people experience between around 28 and 30, and then they experience this again in their mid to late 50s. And this is something that is a very powerful time in someone's life. It is a major astrological cycle. I did do a recording on this years ago, but the audio quality of my device at the time was not very good. So I've decided now to redo the information so that it can come through more clear because it is so important. If you are a person that is in your mid-20s and you are starting to have a hard time, if you are a person that is into your 50s and you're starting to have a hard time, there's a very good chance that this cycle is part of the story of what is going on. Saturn has an orbit of between 28 and 30 years. That's what it takes to move around its full orbit. So when Saturn in the sky gets back to the same exact point that it was at when you were born, that is your Saturn return. When these cycles that are so long like this come back around, it doesn't just happen on the day or the several days if you have more than one pass. Some people have 3 passes for their Saturn return where it crosses over, then retrogrades, and crosses over, so it crosses 3 times. Those aren't just the days that you're feeling this. This is something, it's a long-term cycle. It's a long-term experience. It's building and building as it gets closer. So really, we could say that most of the 20s is very much about Saturn return. Saturn has, like every planet placement and sign, has a range of potential expression from lowest to highest. There are more challenging ways that Saturn can express. There are wonderful ways that Saturn can express. But generally, since we're mostly walking around unconscious, even the most conscious seekers among us, we're still walking around with only 10 to 20, maybe 30% of consciousness. The rest of it, most of our experience is unconscious. So that's why a lot of these things tend to express more in their negative, because there's so many things that are shunted into that space that we are not aware of. And they start to come out in our experiences. And if we're looking, then we can see, oh, okay, that's what the problem is here. And that's what Saturn returns will show us. It shows us unresolved things, just like every other transit does. So Saturn defines your approach to life. If you were to look at a Western astrology chart, it has 12 sections. It's round with 12 sections that look like pie pieces. And it looks like a pizza pie with 12 slices. And each of the slices is a field of experience that we have as humans. So all the fields of experience that we have as humans get put into one of these little segments. And of course, there's cross experiences and things that connect together, etc. But just to be simplistic about it. So when Saturn is in a certain house when you were born, then it takes about 2.5 to 3.5 years to move through into the next sign or into the next house. So while it's there, it's defining your approach to that field of experience. And it does it by what your life is like at the time. So your parents, your caretakers, your religion, your culture, your society, where you are in the world, what your parents or caretakers are doing, what your circumstances are, who the main influencers are, those are the things that Saturn is using to define your approach to life. So you start to see this is done this certain way in this sector, this is done this certain way in this sector. Then when you're coming around to the Saturn return, that's when you start a brand new cycle of redefinition of all the fields of experience of your life. So you spend the next 28 to 30 years after you turn 28 to 30, you spend the next almost 30-year cycle redefining all of your approaches to all those fields of experience based on the things that you figure out up until then. So that's part of what happens in the 20s, is that you start to figure out that what you defined all of these fields of experience by have nothing or very little possibly to do with what's true for you personally. It was defined on what was important or true for other people or the circumstances around you. So you feel that divergence within you as you move into the 20s, where you're feeling like, wow, look at my life, look at what I've created. Is that authentic for me? In many cases, the answer is no, it's not authentic for you. It's authentic for the people, the influencers who co-created that norm for you, that definition of life for you. So then you have to start the process of weeding out, of being brave and walking away from things that were all that you knew, on the quest for authenticity in your life. Many things that people will say as truth in life have an astrological basis. So there is scientific research that shows that divorce rates are lower for people who get married after 30. Why is that? Because they've had their Saturn return. It's not just an arbitrary number. It's not because, oh, well, at 30 they're this and blah, blah, whatever. No, it's because they've had their Saturn return and people are more in tune than they were before that experience with the things that are authentic for them. Now, the degree to which they have shed or cast off the things that were not authentic is a personal process. And anything that you don't deal with at the first Saturn return, you're going to have that come up again at your second Saturn return. And then you also have to live with the challenge of living in that inauthenticity for that Saturn cycle up until then. So it's a really, really big deal. I've heard many people tell me, however, that Saturn return, when they look back at that time, that was an amazing time in their lives. Some people experience their Saturn return as the time when everything gelled. And that's the positive aspect of Saturn. It brings things to fruition. It's the bringer of things to fruition, to manifestation. It's the bringer of tangibility to the intangible. So many people will get married, they'll have children, they'll start a business. Something that feels like it set the course for the rest of their lives will often happen here. And for many people, that's actually quite positive and wonderful. Other people have a terrible time during their Saturn return, heaviness, confusion. And some people have both, where certain things are gelling and manifesting for them, while other things are completely blowing up. So this is Saturn at work in its definition of your approach to each of these aspects of life. So sometimes when you enter your second Saturn return, which is happening like in the mid 50s into that time of your life, it's basically wherever it was. Let's say you were 30 when it happened, then your second one will happen around 60. If you were a little bit younger, then it could happen a little bit before then, and the years leading up to it again are this building process. I've heard of many people who are experiencing their Saturn return, their second one, who had certain issues at the time of their Saturn return, their first one, and they worked with them and integrated them, and now they're experiencing what's left of it, of the unresolved issue, through people close to them. So it's a little bit more further removed from the personal experience, but the lesson is still there to be learned and to be worked with. So you'll know what you cleared up by what doesn't come back around again that was present at the first time, but these are huge cycles. I see many people get divorced after this Saturn cycle. They got married in the beginning of the Saturn cycle. They're together 28 to 30 years and they get divorced. Then they're starting a whole new redefining their whole approach to everything in life at that time in their lives, where that second Saturn cycle was defined based on their partner and how their partner and them worked things together, or their partner's family, etc. And now at this time, the second Saturn return, they're redefining everything in their lives. It's a clean slate. So it can be very stressful, but it can also be very exciting. And if you understand that that's what's going on, it can make it easier. So what does Saturn want of you in this cycle? Saturn wants all the things that are true to Saturn, which is discipline, hard work, dedication, persistence, continuity. So any way you can apply that towards the problems, towards the issues. Some people will have issues with their health and they'll have to apply steadfastness there. Some people will have problems in their relationship and they'll have to apply persistence and healing work there. And there's all the other sectors of life that we have that Saturn could be, challenging them on. So I like to talk about this story that I created to illustrate what Saturn does and how it works, which is the story of these two grandsons and this grandfather. The grandfather represents Saturn, and Saturn is like that. He's the energy of, it's a male-ish energy of, and it can take the form of a woman, of course, but it's this strong male energy that is kind of stoic, emotionally reserved, is very pragmatic, is very practical, but not terribly emotionally involved. It's kind of stern and persistent. So there's this grandfather who has this very large fortune, and as he has the grandkids, two boys, come over, he's trying to teach the grandkids how he created all of the wealth and tangible things that he has benefited from and enjoyed in his life that he currently has. That's what Saturn is very much about, is very tangible, material expressions. So he's trying to teach the kids this by having them do these certain projects. And one of the kids is very nice to very respectful to the grandfather, and he listens and he does these things, even though he doesn't get it, even though they're kind of annoying, even though he's like, my grandfather's crazy, he does the things that Saturn wants. The other kid does not. He bucks up against it, he gets pissed off, he gets in his ego, he says, Grandpa's stupid, this is ridiculous, I'm not doing it, and he doesn't respect the process or do the work. So then time passes, the grandfather passes away, which is the symbolic of Saturn passing through the transit or passing through the cycle. You know, it leaves that point of most conflict, and it brings gifts, it brings lessons. With it, it brings gifts from the lessons that you were supposed to be learning, and the degree to which you learned them is the degree to which you have the gifts. So the grandfather passes away and leaves his estate to the kids in a certain ratio. Both of the kids get this extensive series of books that show them how to manifest in the world, to create in the world. And in those books lie all the answers to anything, to create anything they've ever wanted. They both get that series of books. The kid that was respectful, the kid that was listening, the kid that was helping, the kid that was doing the work, got the entire estate, the rest of it. And the one who didn't. So this has to do with perspective, and Saturn very much is about perspective. If you are feeling victimized, if you are feeling put upon, if you are feeling angry and falling into that victim role, like something is happening to you and you're not stepping up to be accountable or do the work, you're going to have a much harder experience with Saturn, and you're not going to perceive the quality, the quantity of the gifts that are available to you. So this kid that has this bad attitude has this whole book library of how he can create everything he wants in this world. But he doesn't see it as a gift. So therefore, the gift is not as much of a gift. But the other kid who gets it, who did the work, now can create even more with everything he's learned, and he can manage the money and all the estate and everything that the grandfather gave him because he was doing the work. So that's what Saturn wants from you. It wants you to be persistent. It wants you to be disciplined. It wants you to have a good attitude. It wants you to work hard and not fall in a victim role. Know that the work that you're doing is part of your own individual experience that you created, and that if you have problems in your life, then you have to look within yourself to get the resolutions, not blame anyone outside of you or circumstances outside of you for your situation. So that's the big story of Saturn, and that's true really for any Saturn transit. You can apply this knowledge, this understanding to any Saturn transit, and it would be very helpful there. And then you can apply it to the Saturn returns. So I hope this has been helpful. You can see more on my astrology blog and my other offerings on my website, anniehelpsyou.com. And I hope that you get the best of Saturn, because there's so much good to get from him. Okay, bye.